let's get started. And folks, like I said, we're going to start at the top, and there's no controversy this year. There's no quarterback competition. J.J. McCarthy is the starting quarterback heading into the 2023 season.
This year.
Oh, man. I'm sorry. I'm trying to share this video on Facebook, and it keeps popping up.
I was like, why do I hear myself? I've never done that before.
No, never.
Yeah. I've learned my lesson on mocking Josh for mistakes. Anybody that was here for the Charles Wilson fiasco.
Oh, God, yeah.
Josh, it's okay. We all make mistakes. Let's move on. So we'll get to the backup position that we have made a change on the depth chart. Josh will tell you it doesn't matter, so we'll wait a minute for that. But, of course, what does matter is J.J. McCarthy and how he is looking in camp so far. All words so far have been really good, and the BTN crew was on campus recently talking about, they go to each tour, and they were talking about JJ, and they couldn't really hold back how much he has taken over as the leader of this team and how much everybody is gravitating towards him. So Josh, feed off of me there, but like what I said, we're hearing great things about JJ early in camp.
Yeah, I mean, not really a surprise there. This is
right, shocking.
Yeah, right. It's breaking news. JJ looks good. He's kind of taken over. He realizes this is his team. Is really working on his leadership skills, and obviously having that huge off season of being able to throw is gigantic for him. I mean, that's building chemistry with his receivers. Getting more familiar with the playbook and all that kind of stuff, I think is huge and very important for him. But yeah, I mean, I would be concerned if we were hearing stuff during camp that he was having a bad camp or having ups and downs. So this is kind of to be expected, JJ doing JJ things. And, we'll see how that translates once the regular season starts. But he certainly looks like he's picked up right where he left off. And, for Michigan's sake, let's hope that he takes that next step, whatever that next step looks like. I think he's there. He's proven that he's a winner. He's proven that he can lead a championship team. Now, I think obviously the next step for the entire team is to see if he can prove if he can lead a national championship team. So,
for sure.
This is kind of a good building blocks these last couple of weeks for him. So, the QB room's in a good place, and obviously JJ's leading the way in that regard.
Brock, where are you sitting on the JJ hype trade? Because this isn't just Ann Arbor stuff. This isn't just us saying these things, right? There's national guys, including Joel Klatt, just recently put out a list saying he's the number one quarterback in the Big Ten. Adam Brenneman, Heisman, thinks he's going to win the Heisman. I mean, where are you in terms of JJ's potential this year?
I was scrolling on Twitter earlier, and I saw that Joel Klatt list with JJ McCarthy as the top quarterback
in the country. I said Big Ten.
Even ahead of Caleb Williams and Drake May. Now, personally, I'm not maybe that high on him. I need to see a little bit more consistency from him to put him ahead of a Heisman winner and Drake May, who loaded up the stat sheet last year. But it's important to realize that this team will go as far as JJ McCarthy will take it. And if he can take that next step and really, be more consistent in the downfield passing and, grow as a leader and build that chemistry with the receivers during this off season when he's been fully healthy, which he didn't, have last year, then this team is in for a good season. And if he's maybe not as consistent, then maybe they might take a step back or have kind of the same outcome as they did last year. But it's definitely JJ's team, and he will take this team as far as he's capable.
Yeah, my only limit on the JJ Heisman talk has been, will the Michigan offense allow him to put up the numbers necessary to be in that conversation? I think if he can find a nice middle ground of consistency where he's making some of the big plays we saw against Ohio State and TCU, but getting back to maybe, being a little bit more efficient, a little bit higher completion percentage, still hitting the short routes like he was early in the year when he was missing some of the deep balls, right? Some nice middle ground there. Give us that playmakability, extending the plays, hitting the deep shots, but don't miss the easy ones, right? Still keep the offense on schedule.
Yeah.
Josh, I made a sarcastic remark because the last time I teed you up on the backup quarterback conversation, you're like, yeah, it doesn't matter. But I am going to point out Jack Tuttle was the perceived leader heading into fall camp. He has made some mistakes and kind of opened the door, and it sounds like Davis Warren's now in the driver's seat to be the backup, which for this year and arguably the future of the program, you're happy to see Davis Warren sitting atop and ahead of a guy with experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I still stand by that. It doesn't matter. It only matters until JJ gets, if something happens to JJ, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. But I don't think right now any of that really matters. But yeah, I think Davis Warren has really made a big push, these last couple of days and weeks, really, towards that backup quarterback role. And, we'll see how that translates to him getting playing time this year. I think obviously these first 3 games, you could probably see, Davis get out there early and often, by halftime if things are going, as we think they will these first 3 games. But you could really realistically see kind of a healthy mix of Davis Warren and Jack Tuttle. I mean, I don't think that backup distinction is necessarily it's Davis Warren and then Jack Tuttle. It could be either or, really. But ideally, I think from an experience standpoint and class standing standpoint, you want Davis Warren to be that backup. You want Warren to win that job outright. But I think where things stand right now, I don't think it really matters all that much until you have to start thinking about it. Obviously, Alex Orji plays a unique role in that too.
If JJ's hurt, then Michigan's season is looked at very differently, no matter who the backup is.
Right, exactly. So, Orji can play a role in there as well. They're doing some special things with him. Outside of what Jim Harbaugh's mentioned, him in a potential punt return game, which is ridiculous, but
madness.
But whatever. They're doing stuff with him in practice, but obviously I can't talk about that due to sensitivity issues and getting my butt absolutely chewed out by people. That would not be great. But yeah, I think there could be a good combination of guys there, but ultimately, you want Davis Warren to be that guy. And, if you're Jim Harbaugh, you want this team to be holding these massive leads as often as they can during the year to get him some time out there and get him some significant snaps. So I don't know if we'll, see Davis Warren come in or Jack Tuttle come in during a point in the second quarter or something like that. I don't know if we'll ever see that. I guess it just kind of depends on situation, but yeah, I mean, this is JJ's team, but but at the end of the year, there's a big question mark surrounding JJ is will he or won't he go to the NFL? So, are you kind of setting up your future with Davis Warren there and getting him as much experience as possible? Obviously, Jaden Davis is coming in to factor in as well. Alex Orji's there, Jaden Denigle's there too. So, I think with Davis Warren, backing up, I think you're kind of setting yourself up for the future too.
That's a good point, Josh, that you made, because I think JJ McCarthy is the one player on this team that if he gets injured, the whole season is totally off the rails, right? Yeah. The goal is a national championship, and then multiple players have publicly stated that. And even if a guy like Blake Corum gets hurt or Donovan Edwards or basically anyone on defense, the season is still alive and well. But, there's a significant talent drop off between McCarthy and either Tuttle and Warren. And another thing you mentioned was Davis Warren is a guy who will be around next year, and Jack Tuttle won't be. And so obviously you want the better player to play in that backup role, but in the sense of thinking ahead to 2024, Davis Warren would be the guy that you'd want to roll with, because just to get him more experience. And, obviously Jaden Davis would be coming in and there might be a little bit of a battle there, but to get Davis Warren as much experience as possible would be key for 2024.
Agree completely. And then, the Orji stuff is crazy. I mean, we've talked about special packages and using him like a wildcat running the ball, but Harbaugh dropping that kick return nugget was something. So we'll see once the season starts.
There's
Brock,
always
you
a
mentioned
surprise when it comes to an orgy.
Oh, you had to do it.
Always a surprise.
Had to do it. Well, all right, transition. Brock, you mentioned running backs, so let's talk about the running back depth chart. So the starters, again, no discussion there. Blake Corum back, surprised some folks when he elected to return to Ann Arbor instead of go to the NFL. He's healthy, stronger, faster. He's contributing in all the drills. Donovan Edwards as well. The conversation here, I think, is we've talked about this, but like, how good can Blake Corum be coming back? What kind of usage is there going to be with Corum Edwards? I guess, Brock, you've been vocal. I gave you a little crap for this before when we talked about impact players, that you just think Corum's going to take a step back, not necessarily his skill set, but just the way they're going to use him this year and all the other weapons that are available.
Absolutely. I may have jumped the gun a little bit. I think it was back in May when we did that big collective group of the top 10 most impactful players of the 2023 season. I omitted Blake Corum. Maybe I shouldn't have. He's obviously going to be a key player on this team, but I do think he's going to take a bit of a step back. I don't think he's going to get anywhere near the carries, yards, or touchdowns that he had last year. And I think they're going to be much more, the coaching staff, that is, they're going to be much more thoughtful to keep him healthy late in the year, because I feel like they kind of realized they ran him into the ground a little bit when he got hurt against Illinois. And so I think they're going to mix in Edwards a little more. I think they're going to do go to Benjamin Hall, CJ Stokes, Cole Cabana. They're going to go deeper on the depth chart to maybe keep Corum and Edwards fresh.
Yeah, over 25 carries in every single Big Ten game. He had 18 in the first half against Illinois before he suffered that injury. So, yeah, Edwards coming back junior year. I'm with you. I think he's still going to be unbelievable. I do think they'll use him in the passing game a little bit too. But, yeah, it's tough to see him getting, comparable numbers. One of our first position battles here that there really isn't a lot of clarity on yet is RB3, Josh. Mm-hmm. Last year, CJ Stokes was named RB3 heading into the season. I don't think there's going to be anything like that this year. This is going to be one where I think Hall, Stokes, and Mullings are all going to see carries the first part of the season.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like, some sort of committees going on there at RB3. I mean, and you can really even throw in, Tabby Dunlap and Cole Cabana into the mix too. I think those guys are kind of on the bottom rung of that group. But yeah, I mean, there really hasn't been much coming out of running back 3 outside of, the obvious. Blake and Donovan look really good. They look 100%, which is great. And that's kind of going to be your bell cows right there. So another one of those situations where, does Donovan Edwards declare for the draft after this year? So, and which results in,
he says yes.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely has not been shy about saying that that's what he wants to do. So, you're potentially looking at your top 2 running backs being gone this year. So, kind of like the quarterback situation, you might not necessarily need your backups, but do you get them experience? Do you kind of say, hey, Benjamin Hall had this really good spring. Do you trust him out there when the snaps matter? CJ Stokes had some flashes last year in his freshman season. And then obviously Kalel Mullings had his ups and downs as well. Not really
perfect passer rating though.
Yeah, that too. Can't forget about that. I mean, there's really no, I guess, dominant guy in that second tier of running backs yet. Stokes has made some plays. He's shown he's had vision, but needs to build consistency. And the only way you really get consistency is if you see the field. So again, which kind of goes back to the original question, is how often are these guys going to get snaps? I think the big thing too is that, Corum and Edwards haven't been healthy for a full year together. So, obviously Edwards was successful against Ohio State in the fourth quarter. Corum really hasn't had a big game against Ohio State, or really hasn't had a full game, because you factor in Hassan Haskins in 21 too. So I think there's so many, I guess, moving parts to the running backs, the group. Do you kind of lay back a little bit and dish out more equal carries for the 2 guys, but at the same time, do you keep both of them healthy and not get into a situation where, at the Illinois game where you're like, oh crap, we don't have any running backs and we have to rely on, a Isaiah Gash who, just was huge for Michigan during that game, and fortunate to have that kind of guy as a walk-on. But I haven't really heard anything from the running back, the running back 3 group yet. There's obviously some guys that I have to ask about. Not everyone is going to be talked about when I talk about some guys, because it's mainly on perspective on who you talk to as well. But yeah, I mean, there's so many questions there outside of the RB2 and RB1 and RB2 and what Michigan does and what they could do moving forward, that, it creates a kind of a really interesting discussion. And, does Michigan have, are they kind of forced to play their hand a little bit and play some more depth? I don't know. I guess we'll see.
One last thing on the running backs before we go to the next position group. I'm going to be really interested to see in 13 days in the season opener how long Harbaugh lets Corum and Edwards go, because I feel like that'll be a really big indicator as to how they're going to use them throughout the season. If it was me, I honestly wouldn't let either of them see the second half for sure. Maybe even pull them before then, just to keep them fresh, keep them healthy. And if we're being honest, there are probably 7, 8, maybe even 9 games on this schedule that Michigan could win without Corum and Edwards. Mm-hmm. They're just that talented all over the board, and they could throw CJ Stokes or Ben Hall in there, and they'd still be able to win most of these games.
I want to see them limit carries because it's a blowout, not because they're scared to play the guys, right? Like I never like talking about carries like that, because it's just, you can't play that way, right? But yeah, go out and stomp them, and then you can start resting your guys. Michigan's kind of taking it easy in the first half of a lot of games and put themselves, like, they win games in the third quarter. At least that was the MO last year. Michigan, Penn State, Shadyville brought this up. So last year's Penn State game, be how the carries are split. I think that was probably the best example of Corum and Edwards that we've seen in terms of, both of them being healthy and seeing how they can wear down a team. In that game, Corum still had 28 carries.
Right.
And Donovan had 16, and JJ threw the ball 24 times. So what did Stokes? Stokes had 4 carries. He was the only, other than McCarthy, getting a few runs. Like, I don't know. I think last year was kind of an anomaly. Same way with wide receiver, we'll get to in a second, in terms of the amount of targets one guy had. If you look at Harbaugh's time, there's usually been 3-4 main guys. Mm-hmm. This year, it's not going to be 3 or 4 main guys because Corum and Edwards are just so much better. But I think if a Stokes or Hall, I think Mullings is maybe a little different type, but Stokes or Hall, if they can show they can do the same things as Corum and Edwards without a lot of drop off, I think they're going to get a lot of the carries too, not just in spot duty or when somebody's hurt, but like being a part of a rotation. Right. So, like I said, wide receiver, pull that up here in a second. Replacing Ronnie Bell, dominated in targets last year, literally had more than twice as many as Cornelius and Roman in the second spot there. But we got some good information on this group coming out of fall camp so far. I think there's a clear top 3, one we anticipated, with Cornelius Johnson on the outside, Roman staying in the slot, and Tyler Morris taking over that Ronnie Bell role in the Z. I know guys have dealt with some injuries as well, as expected. Josh, you've talked about those usual hamstrings and muscle issues, but I've heard a lot of good things about Morris, heard a lot of good things about Roman Wilson and his weight gain as well. That top 3 is looking good.
Yeah, no, I think you know what you have in Cornelius Johnson. Obviously, Roman Wilson kind of still has a lot more to prove. I think he Donovan really hasn't had a full year of health. He's had kind of, a really, like last year in particular, he had a really strong start the first 5 games and then got hurt, and then really kind of was up and down ever since, had his moments, but he's another guy that kind of needs a full year of health to really show what he could do. And Roman's addressed that in the weight room and kind of to add more muscle to his frame. Has had a really strong fall camp. Has had, he was really good in the scrimmage recently. Kind of taking advantage of guys having some muscle issues. Like Peyton O'Leary hasn't seen the field barely at all this camp because he's had a hamstring issue. And Darius Clemens is just now working his way back too. So that's kind of limited of what we've been able to hear about Clemens too. I know we get asked a lot, how's Darius Clemens looking? And I think he's probably the most intriguing receiver out of this entire group outside of maybe Tyler Morris. But he's having muscle issues, and it's kind of limited his ability to get out there. But now I think he's pretty close to full go, and he will be full go by the season, if barring anything unforeseen. But I mean, you know what you have in Cornelius Johnson. Roman is, just waiting for his moment to really show what he can do with consistency. Tyler Morris is another interesting guy that the coaches really like. I think the big thing last year what I heard about Tyler Morris is that the coaches really liked him because he just didn't drop anything. Always had strong hands, always caught everything. And, now this year with Bellamy saying that, he's basically a Ronnie Bell clone. I think you'd take that if you were Michigan for sure. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, I'm kind of intrigued to see what Fred Moore and Samaj Morgan can do. I think those two guys have been probably the most consistent of out of the freshmen that we've heard. And obviously they were aided by being there in the spring. Carmelo English, obviously not there in the spring, but has had a strong fall and has made some plays in the couple of scrimmages. So he's another guy that's super intriguing. But Fred Moore and Samaj Morgan have really kind of had some that really impressed right from when they arrived on campus. So if they can continue to do what they're doing, they should see the field. I think the big thing for me is, especially with these young guys, is can they block? I think
that's always the obstacle.
Yeah, especially Fred Moore and Samaj Morgan and Carmelo English. I'm not worried about Tyler Morris. I know that he can block. But yeah, those freshmen, like it's fine that they're making plays and all that, but can they make plays for other people? Can they create plays for other people, I should say?
It's not the first camp we've had freshmen hyped up and then they didn't really see the field very much because of that exact reason. Last year. Right. So Brock, what's the story for you in this group?
This group, I'm looking for more consistency. We, Josh started by saying we know what we're getting with Cornelius Johnson, and that's true to an extent, but there were plenty of games last year where he didn't really show up much. He had maybe a reception here, a reception there, and then all of a sudden he blew up in the Ohio State game. Mm-hmm. And sort of the same thing with Roman Wilson. Even he's struggled to stay healthy himself. And so I'm just looking for more consistency. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with McCarthy at quarterback and just building that chemistry and making sure everyone is on the same page. And I'm really high on the freshman too. Like Josh was talking about Carmelo English. He's actually my pick for breakout freshman of the year. I think he's going to have a really big season. And Fred Moore and Samaj Morgan too. We'll see how well they can block. And we've even heard Samaj Morgan's name being thrown around at punt returner. So we'll see if he can get on the field that way. That'd be really interesting to see. And along with a few other guys like Donovan Edwards and Mikey Sainristil and those types of guys. So, yeah, just looking for more consistency. I'm really excited about Tyler Morris. Excited to see what he can bring to the table in that slot role. I know he didn't really have the stats last year that maybe a normal freshman of his caliber would have had, but I think his connection with McCarthy could be huge for this team in 2023.
Yeah, Morris was coming off of a ACL injury to end high school as well, so that kind of delayed his progress. And yeah, I'm with you. JJ hasn't hidden the fact that they were boys back in high school. They didn't play senior year. JJ was down at IMG, but yeah. So I think Morris can step in and be that Ronnie Bell, that safety net for him and the guy that he targets in the flat and some of those out routes we saw one against Rutgers. Clemens is still the story for me. I'm a little bummed he's been dinged up in camp. I think they want to plug him into that Andrell Anthony role right away. And if he can execute, unlike Anthony, Anthony got a lot of chances to be that deep shot. He only had 7 receptions on 19 targets. So if Clemens becomes that guy that can win some 50-50 balls or, win some jump balls or become that deep threat, I think he's got a nice little role in this offense as well. But yeah, I'm with you. I think we know what we have with Cornelius and Roman, and it's going to be interesting to see if maybe there's something more there, right? Can Cornelius be more consistent, and then can Roman stay healthy and be, well, what everybody thought he could be, wide receiver one, right? Wide receiver one on this team could also be playing tight end, right? We've talked about this a little bit. The hype is high for Colston Loveland coming into this year. He's not the only one. Michigan also added A.J. Barner in the transfer portal. He has had a great camp as well. Again, no shock at the top of this depth chart. But there has been some news. One player has not been super healthy now practicing, Josh. And then I think one of the other stories in his absence has been freshman Zach Marshall going back to spring. But what are you hearing about Matt Hibner and maybe some of these other guys?
Yeah, another guy that's been slow to get back to speed. He's just now back with the team, so that's good. And the tight end position is really interesting depth wise. That Michigan really likes what they have. They essentially kind of consider Colston Loveland and AJ Barner kind of interchangeable with their positions, whether they're inline blocking or going out wide for reception or for receiving, excuse me. But they really like Marlon Klein. They think he's kind of like an athletic freak. They just need to get him some experience and kind of needs to put it all together. Matt Hibner obviously had a really good spring game and had a good spring and then had an injury and then that kind of derailed everything. But another guy that I'm hearing that's really coming on strong, is really taking advantage of these injuries is walk-on Josh Beetham. He's really excelled and really taken advantage of what these opportunities have been given to him. And he's a guy that Jim Harbaugh personally has called out several times, during team film sessions of a guy that's been excelling, has called him an up and comer in front of the team and has, really called him out and has said some really good things to the team. So he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on, especially in the depth position for both the Y and the H. He can really do both. During the, not this scrimmage, but this last scrimmage that they had, Beetham had the second most receptions behind Roman Wilson in the scrimmage. So, and again, that's because they had a lot of guys out due to muscle issues and stuff. However, I mean, if you're a walk-on and you're doing this kind of stuff, it's still impressive. So, I think Hibner is going to have the most opportunities given to him just because of, he has the higher ceiling athletically. However, Josh Beetham is going to be in the mix. Zach Marshall, Deacon Tonielli, they're kind of a little ways out. I think they're still kind of, they're in the mix, but I think they're kind of on the back end of the mix. The Zach Marshall could be the backup, but I think when you've got guys like Marlon Klein and Hibner in there, and you can also throw in Max Bredesen as well. I think you can kind of prioritize pushing Marshall back and Tonielli back until they kind of get up to speed and how these guys, how it kind of clicks for these freshmen later in the year. But yeah, I think the big takeaway is that Michigan definitely has depth outside of Barner and Loveland, which is great news. If Marlon Klein puts it together, I think he could be a dangerous receiver, and Hibner too. I mean, Hibner's athletic. He's quick. Just needs to stay healthy. So, we'll see. And I think those guys will get opportunities. I definitely think they'll get opportunities. And, just another kind of way for Michigan to mix things up offensively with a bunch of different weapons all over the field. So really intriguing because, you get Loveland for another year after this year too. So, and technically AJ Barner as well. So you have some time to season these guys if these guys stick around. I mean, with transfer portal, who the hell knows these days? But it allows these guys to get kind of seasoning a little bit, and there's a lot of good names in that group that can really assert themselves to be relied upon to kind of interchange out these guys to give them rest. So All good things, in my opinion.
It says a lot about the depth at not only tight end, but the whole team, that a walk-on tight end is coming into a scrimmage a few weeks before the season starts,
Right.
and he's the second leading receiver in terms of receptions behind Roman Wilson. And obviously, like you said, Josh, a few guys were kept out for, cautionary reasons and things like that. But definitely a good sign of the depth of this team, that Josh Beetham is really stepping up. And just touching on Colston Loveland a little bit, he's going to have a breakout season. He's going to be a star.
Mm-hmm.
We saw it a little bit last year. He had the touchdown against Ohio State, and then he had another one in the Purdue game. So he's definitely he started feeling it last year, and I feel like that connection with McCarthy is going to definitely be there.
I had to laugh at Derek's comment here. Brock's rocking the baby face. He's got to start taking the beard.
Hey, Derek, I actually just shaved last night, so maybe
I was waiting for him to say, I just shaved last week, guys.
Yeah, I just shaved the peach fuzz last night. The
Yeah,
two hairs on my chin.
I bet you can surprise with a pretty wicked beard. Right? Oh. No, I love this group. I love this group because Colston Loveland is another guy that it's easy for us to hype.
Yeah.
But when Jake Butt says Colston Loveland is already doing things he never could.
Yeah.
Right.
I forgot about that. That's a good point. I forgot about it. He said that. Yeah.
Whoa. Right. So a tight end is going to finish second or third in receiving every year under Jim Harbaugh. I think this is the 1 year. Colston Loveland could be, well, I mean, maybe not 1 year because he could next year too, but he could be the leading receiver. I really believe that, just because of what he can do as a tight end, getting a chip block, getting loose in the flat, but also in the seam and hopefully in the red zone. And same thing with Barner. I'm glad you brought up that they're treating them interchangeably. Barner's not just an inline guy. You can go watch his Indiana highlights.
Yeah.
He is deadly down the seam. He's a guy that can win jump balls. He had a touchdown for Indiana. I can't remember who they were playing against, but very similar to the Colston Loveland Big Ten championship game jump ball. So those two are really, really good, and arguably the closest match that Michigan has had. Obviously not the first great duo of tight ends, but in terms of that interchangeable piece. And I'm with you. I think if Hibner and Klein can stay healthy, you'd like to have them up there instead of the freshman early. But man, does Zach Marshall give me Colston Loveland vibes, man. He really does. So not saying he's going to be a huge contributor at the end of the year like Loveland was. Hopefully that's not the case, right? Hopefully you have healthy Loveland and Barner. But in terms of that wide receiver trapped in a tight end's body, that's what Zach Marshall makes me think of. So, all right, on to the next group. And this might be the most position battle heavy spot we've got right now. I can't really, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit and not make it crazy. I brought up the Michigan method at the top of the show. The Michigan method, of course, is what Michigan did last season with Cade McNamara and JJ McCarthy. Letting one player start one game, letting the other player start the next game, and then going from there. Jim Harbaugh has said when it comes to left tackle and right tackle, that's what we're going to see. So right now at left tackle, you've got Ladarius Henderson and Carson Barnhart battling out. At right tackle, you have Trent Jones and Miles Hinton battling out. So if we're to believe Harbaugh, and I don't see why we wouldn't, we could see those positions split going forward. I've operated under an assumption pretty much since Ladarius Henderson came to Michigan or announced he was transferring to Michigan, Josh, that Henderson was going to ultimately win that left tackle job, and then Barnhart was probably going to slide out to right tackle, right? Mm-hmm. Harbaugh said Barnhart's had the best camp out of any tackle so far, right? So is there a scenario where it's not just, okay, we play top five, Henderson, and then Barnhart slides out? If Henderson wins the job, is Barnhart now a backup and not getting that right tackle job? Is Jones getting it? Hinton? Is Barnhart winning left tackle? I'm surprised how unsure we are at this point of fall camp.
Yeah. Before I get into it, I want to address this question here, or a comment by Account 22. They're saying he's pretty surprised Gentry isn't higher on the depth chart.
I thought I had him on here. Where'd he go?
Well, that's the thing, though. That's the thing. There's so many guys there. Even Harbaugh himself last week, the reporters, he was basically like, man, Andrew Gentry has been so good. We can't even put him in the 2 deep because
I wish I could say it more.
Yeah, I wish we could put him in the 2 deep. That's how crazy this whole offensive line room is this year. So
Yeah, Gentry's probably a starter next year.
Yeah, he'll probably come. He'll probably play a lot next year, and that's just how wild this whole depth chart is. So, as far as Carson Barnhart, yeah, I mean he's had a fantastic fall camp, and I think you're gonna have to just like take him off the field by force. I don't think you're gonna. He's at the point right now where, I don't see how you can't play him. Earned his keep when Trente Jones went out. Really cemented himself. Now it's like, man, I don't know. I don't know what you do. Yeah, if Carson Barnhart wins the left tackle job, how do you factor in Ladarius Henderson? Do you say, all right, Ladarius kind of bumps out right, and then that kind of
see? I don't think that's it.
No.
Henderson played left guard for 2
Right.
years and played left. I think moving him to left tackle makes sense because of his talent set. I don't think moving him to right makes sense. So if Barnhart wins that job, I think Henderson's on the bench. You're not going to start him over Hinton and Jones, who have played right tackle and started at
right.
tackle.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like,
and that's crazy to think about, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, I mean, again, I don't think there's going to be drop off with either guy out there.
No.
You could rotate starting both of those guys every other game, and they'd be fine. That's just how ridiculous this whole group is. So, and the coaching staff have been pretty honest that they want a starting five. They want a core group of five,
right?
And you do want a core group. I mean, you want to have that group of guys, but if they have 10 guys that they trust and that they can rotate in, that kind of frees up a lot of guys to be healthy. Michigan had some guys banged up on the offensive line pretty much from start to finish, and you really wouldn't know because it's just they're so stellar. But again, I keep going back to this, but if you can keep these guys healthy all year, that bodes so well for postseason play and keeping guys fresh. So I don't envy the decision that these coaches have to make with Ladarius Henderson and Barnhart. I mean, with Trente Jones and Hinton at the same time too at right tackle. I mean, I don't know how close that thing is, but man, I mean, you've got depth. I mean, that's the great thing. You've got depth. Percy has played. Drake Nugent too at center. We haven't even talked about that yet. I mean, that's a dude who's played a lot of football.
Hanging there with him.
Greg Crippen is right there.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't know if they'll want to rotate centers at all. I don't think that's really ideal. But Drake Nugent. I mean, they love Drake Nugent. They love his demeanor. They love what he brings to the weight room and his attitude. So. Man, it's just crazy. It's insane. I've never seen anything like it.
Another thing Jake Butt said was the second unit on the offensive line could start for more than half of the teams in college football. And he's right. There's 9 dudes on this team that have taken a start. You mentioned Percy. Gio Huddy, when he came in for Keegan last year, no drop off. They brought in Nugent, who they're high on, but I think Crippen absolutely could play there. We brought up Gentry, doesn't get enough hype. So Brock, same thing I've kind of been asking on each of these groups. What do you think the story is? And are you a guy that says, hey, find me the best 5. I want the continuity. Obviously, I'll flex in with, health concerns, but do you want to see this group settle on 5, or do you want to see some rotation maybe?
I think rotation would be important for the first 2 or 3 games, but yeah, I want to see a solid 5. And you actually kind of touched on my first point that I was going to bring up is I think it's important that they find the 5 players that work best together. And so maybe if Barnhart is the best left tackle, but if he's also the best right tackle, then you kind of have a decision to make, like, okay, do we put him at right and then we find the best left, or do we move him to left and then find the best right? And it's kind of tough for Henderson because he's kind of stuck in that left tackle spot. He can't really move around like Barnhart could. So maybe if Barnhart's the best left tackle and he's also the best right tackle, maybe he goes to right and Henderson goes at left. And then you have Hinton and Jones, as the backups there. It's all about finding the 5 best that work together. And obviously Zinter and Keegan are our starters at guards. And I do think Drake Nugent will edge out Greg Crippen at center, and we'll see how it plays out in the first few games. But yeah, that tackle group is just fascinating, and it's gonna be so fun to watch. Just the battle, and I'm just excited to see who they trot out there to start the season opener. I want to see who the first 5 are, and I want to see how they rotate.
Probably unfairly, but Hinton wasn't a guy that I had penciled in to the battle very much. I thought it was going to be figured out left tackle and then probably Barnhart or Jones. Just Hinton's a guy that struggled with health a little bit. He showed up in crazy shape. The dude is a svelte 340 pounds, 6'8". He just looks like a monster.
Gigantic man.
He's a big dude. Yeah. And he's surprisingly athletic for his size as well. And I think that's the biggest thing is on the right side, you need somebody who's going to be athletic enough in the run game and be able to pull out and make some moves there. So it's crazy. I didn't think it would be this complicated. I'm excited to see, but I'm with you. Give me the best 5 and the guys that work the best together, right? Each guy needs to know who the dude on his shoulder, what he's doing, right? So Henderson, Barnhart, whoever might be better, but when it comes to you've got Keegan and Zinter there's a trust thing and understanding how the guys are working together. I think that's a huge piece of it. So,
and I also want to say too, I don't think there's a wrong answer to any of that.
No,
any of that mix, any of those guys.
There's not that big of a gap between these dudes.
Right. Exactly. Right. So yeah, it's just, you could go, I don't think you could go wrong either direction, and I think the best thing too is what Barnhart said last week when he talked to the media. He's like, obviously he wants to win it, but he's going to be right there on the sideline. If he doesn't win the job, he's going to be there cheering the guys along right there. And, expects the same from, the other guy too. And he'll absolutely get that. So that's the great part. So.
The culture of this group and what Sharon Moore has built and Minter spoke to this as well about competition, right? We named 2 players in Carson Barnhart and Jones, who both were here last year and started. And then we named 2 players in Henderson and Hinton who were brought in as transfers.
Yeah.
And Jones and Barnhart stayed knowing full well they were going to have to compete for this job and potentially not win it. Right. Like that's the culture, and it's impressive. And that's why they've got such a deep and talented group.